All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Daniel Imradana, and today I will be exploring a presentation. The title of a presentation is Demystifying Cultural Studies. This discuss about traditional academic approach, trade, literature, and art as if they exist in a isolated vacuum. Through this session, we are going to unpack how cultural studies dismantle these boundaries, revealing how art, society, politics, and power constantly collide in our everyday lives. And then next slide is what what on earth is cultural studies? I start with a foundational question: what on earth is cultural studies? Rather than a rigid academic box, it is flexible, highly engaged set of questions and practice. First, let's look at the classroom spark. Imagine a class discussing Alice Walker novel titled The Color Purple. A traditional approach might stop at analyzing the text narrative structure. A cultural studies approach, however, takes off by exploring Steven Spielberg's in film adaptation. What it drew angry response from certain viewers, the implication of casting Oprah Winfrey, and the real-world intersection of race, gender, and mass media. This directly connects to our second point, the power focus, burnout of the social upheavals of the 1960s years. This field heavily borrows tools from Marxism, feminism, anthropology, and film theory. Greatly influenced by French theorist Michael Foucault, it examines how discourse our socially accepted way of thinking, writing, and speaking shape and exercise power over us. In the next slide, we discuss about the four pillars of cultural studies. To understand how practitionalize this concept, we must look at the four pillars of cultural studies. Pillar one is transcending boundaries. This methodology refuses to stay in its own lane. It deliberately cuts across traditional academic disciplines like literature and history, so scrutinies in everything from classic novels to telenovelas, multiversing, and prison architecture. It is an active engaged project rather than a detached academic exercise. And the next pillar is political engagement. Critics see themselves as an oppositional force against oppressive social power structure. They advocate for marginalized or subaltern viewpoints and reject traditional treatment or critique about theory that limit culture to elite realms of taste and sensibility. And the next pillar is smashing the high or low divide. It completely rejects the elitist assumption that high art like a symphony is inherently superior to low culture, like a rock concert. It analyzes literature like an anthropologist analysis an artifact, mapping out why a certain culture's product is value over another at any given time. And the last pillar is analyzing the means of production. This involves asking critically practical questions like how fund the artists, who publish and distribute the books, who has the money or literacy to buy them. It reminds us that literature is tied directly to the economic realities and financial risks of the publishing. All right, we move in the next slide. Why this matters to students? Why is this shift in perspective so vital for us as a students? There are two core regions highlighted here. The first is navigating diversity. As we move through the 21st century, demographics are rapidly shifting toward a majority into minority population. Cultural studies equip us with the premium skills needed to productively handle cultural difference and conflicts. And the second, teaching controversy instead of ignoring deep ideological battles such as racism, sexism, or homophobia. This approach brings this structural tension directly into the classroom conversation, training us to be critical citizens who can construct conversation for ourselves. And the next lab is British cultural materialism. Now, let us turn to specific trends within this discipline, starting with British cultural materialism. This leftist movement grew out of desire to critique a political academic methods and focus on three core concepts. First concept is redefining the masses. Raymond Williams famously pushed back against elite disdain for the working class, stating there are no masses. Their only way of seeing people as masses. And the second concept is hidden hegemony. Relying on the Marxist theories of Antonio Gramsci, British critics focus on hegemonic power, the subtle, invisible way dominant structures shape our internal sense of reality so deeply that we accept our own subordination without thinking to rebel. And the last concept is ideology in art. Louis Althusser expand on this by arguing that popular literature often carries the heavy baggage of a culture of dominant theology, actively working to reproduce existing social relations and keep capitalism running smoothly with the fear of a revolution. And the last, we move in the new historicism. Our final major pillar is neo-historicism. It is perfectly summed up by the critical motto, the text is historical and the story is textual. It operates on three distinct principles. First, equal footing. It treats literature and historical document with equal weight. A new historical will dynamically read a canonical play alongside an obscure daily entry, a medical treatise, or a political poem from the exact same era to discover shocking cultural overlaps. And second, rejecting fixed views. It completely throws out the old school historic idea that a historical era has a single, uniformly shared worldview. Instead, it looks at history as a highlight volatile, constant class of competing power dynamics. And third is K influence. Is the coined by Stephen Greenblatt. This critical lens draws heavily from Foucault power about genealogies and Frederick Simpson's famous comment. The comment is always historicized. Ultimately, cultural studies strip away academic elitism. It hands us the critical binoculars who need to see how text, stories, and systemic power dynamics weave together to construct the world we navigate today. And then, thank you for your attention and listening my presentation. And I apologize if I have mistakes. And see you, everyone.